The Second World War introduced weapons of unprecedented lethality to the global stage. No infantry weapon was perhaps more terrifying or more mythologized than the German MG42 machine gun. It was a successor to the already formidable MG34 and incorporated radical new design elements for mass production. The MG42 could be manufactured quickly and cheaply, which was a massive advantage for the German war machine facing mounting material shortages. Its most defining characteristic, however, was its astonishingly high rate of fire, earning it the ominous nickname Hitler's buzzsaw. This incredible cyclic rate was a deliberate feature intended to maximize the psychological and suppressive effect on enemy troops. It was designed to saturate an area with a curtain of fire so dense that no soldier would dare raise their head. German doctrine elevated the machine gun to the central pillar of its infantry squad, essentially reversing the traditional role of the rifleman. The standard riflemen were tasked with supporting the machine gun team, which carried the bulk of the squad's firepower. Troops were told that the MG42 was the key to their defense, a weapon that could single-handedly halt any enemy advance. This belief was deeply ingrained in the German military psyche, promising a clear technological edge on the battlefield. Its sound alone was enough to spread panic, a terrifying, ripping noise that sounded like canvas being torn apart. The MG42 quickly became the primary defensive weapon on every front, from the frozen steppes of the Eastern Front to the beaches of Normandy. It was a masterpiece of military engineering, but a weapon's effectiveness is ultimately determined by the tactics used against it. The very success of the MG42 would eventually breed an over-reliance that exposed a critical weakness in the German approach to small unit combat. The mechanical genius of the MG42 was its roller-lock bolt and simplified stamped parts construction. This innovative manufacturing process allowed for rapid assembly and ensured reliability under the harshest battlefield conditions. But the defining specification was the astounding rate of fire, officially listed between 1,200 and 1,500 rounds per minute. This speed was so exceptional that human ears could not distinguish individual shots, hence the iconic buzzsaw or zipper sound. By contrast, the American M1917 Browning machine gun fired at a comparatively sluggish rate of approximately 450 to 600 rounds per minute. The German designers deliberately chose this high rate to maximize the probability of hitting a moving enemy target. A faster bullet stream meant more lead was in the air during the fraction of a second a target was exposed. This density of fire created a lethal area of effect, making any movement across the battlefield incredibly risky for Allied soldiers. The MG42 served as both a light machine gun, carried by a two-man team, and a heavy machine gun, mounted on a tripod for sustained fire. This versatility further cemented its place as the undisputed king of the German infantry squad's armory. Every squad allocated its defensive position around the MG42's field of fire, establishing interlocking cones of destruction. Any approaching enemy force would inevitably be channeled into these pre-sighted danger zones. The weapon's effectiveness on D-Day was immediately apparent to the Allied invaders who faced its unyielding fire. German defenders used the MG42 to great effect, cutting down entire waves of landing troops as they exited the ramps of their landing craft. The incredible volume of fire created a psychological barrier that often proved as effective as the bullets themselves. It was an engineering marvel that made the individual German soldier feel almost invincible when entrenched with his weapon. The military doctrine of the Wehrmacht placed a heavy emphasis on sustained, overwhelming fire from its machine guns. Unlike other armies, the German squad was built around the MG42, not a collection of individual riflemen. This concept was known as the Feuerwehr, or Fire Brigade, principle, and it maximized the MG42's terrifying potential. The machine gunner was the most important man in the squad, and the rest of the unit existed to protect and feed his weapon. Riflemen, armed with Kar 98K rifles, were primarily used to guard the flanks of the machine gun position and carry its heavy ammunition load. Their own individual firepower was secondary to the continuous stream of fire provided by the MG42. In a defensive situation, a German position could rapidly establish a massive wall of bullets that was almost impossible to penetrate. The machine gunner would fire in long bursts, sometimes expending hundreds of rounds in a single engagement. This approach was incredibly effective at stopping frontal assaults and forcing the enemy to seek cover immediately. The strategy was designed to paralyze the enemy, making them unable to advance, communicate, or return effective fire. Once the enemy was pinned down, the German riflemen would then maneuver to eliminate the disorganized and trapped troops. The MG42 was seen as the hammer that crushed the enemy's spirit, allowing the infantry to then perform the cleanup. This led to a powerful, but predictable, defensive layout across the German-occupied territories. The effectiveness of this doctrine instilled an overconfidence in many German combat units. They believed that as long as the MG42 was operational and supplied with ammunition, their position was secure against any infantry attack. However, this reliance on static, sustained fire would eventually be countered by a more fluid and dynamic approach to combat. The sound of the MG42 was a weapon in itself, an acoustic signature of dread that became synonymous with the Wehrmacht's defense. American and British troops instantly recognized the sound, which differed sharply from the slower, more labored thump-thump-thump of Allied machine guns. The high-pitched, tearing sound was a constant reminder of the incredible volume of fire being poured onto their positions. It was a sound that broke morale and led to a profound reluctance to leave the relative safety of cover. Veteran soldiers often reported that the noise of the MG42 was the most frightening element of combat on the Western Front. The intense suppression forced attacking units to halt their advance, thereby surrendering the initiative to the German defenders. This constant, high-volume threat meant that any small movement could be instantly met with a hailstorm of machine gun fire. The psychological pressure could turn a cautious advance into a paralyzed stalemate, buying the German forces crucial time. This fear was deliberately cultivated by the Germans, who understood the power of an intimidating and effective weapon. Field manuals emphasized the suppressive role, knowing that a frightened enemy is an ineffective enemy. The German position was often not about killing every advancing soldier, but rather preventing them from advancing at all. The effectiveness of this psychological warfare was a testament to the MG42's engineering and the German doctrine surrounding it. It made the task of clearing a German position feel like a monumental, almost impossible undertaking for the Allied troops. The Allies quickly realized that simply assaulting a position protected by an MG42 team was a recipe for catastrophic casualties. A new approach was required, one that did not rely on overwhelming firepower but on superior tactics and individual initiative. The battlefield became a psychological contest, and for a long time, the MG42 held the advantage in that silent war of nerves. The Allied forces, particularly the American infantry, were initially overwhelmed by the MG42's presence on the battlefield. Their early encounters in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy quickly highlighted the stark difference in small unit fire doctrine. American infantry squads were built around the M1 Garand rifle, a semi-automatic weapon offering excellent individual firepower. However, the American squad possessed less continuous suppressive fire capability compared to the German setup. The squad's automatic rifle was the M1918 Browning automatic rifle, a heavy weapon that fired at a much slower rate than the MG42. When an American squad faced an entrenched MG42, they were often instantly pinned down and unable to match the volume of German fire. This inability to trade fire effectively led to high casualty rates in early engagements. The German troops, confident in their machine gun, would often hold their ground until the very last moment. Allied commanders soon realized that their standard frontal assault tactics were suicidal against a well-placed MG42. The weapon's ability to sweep a wide field of fire with incredible speed made crossing open ground a fatal proposition. Soldiers reported feeling exposed and helpless under the torrent of German bullets, which seemed to come from everywhere at once. There was a genuine sense of technological and tactical inferiority regarding the suppression capability of their own weapons. The initial struggles forced the U.S. Army to re-evaluate its entire infantry combat approach. They could not simply rely on superior numbers or aerial bombardment to solve the machine gun problem. The solution had to be found at the squad level, in the hands of the individual American GI facing the MG42. This desperate need for a countermeasure would ultimately give rise to the doctrine of fire and maneuver, a game-changing adaptation. The American answer to the MG42 was not a new weapon, but a new way of fighting, the system of fire and maneuver. This doctrine codified the battlefield tactic of two elements working in perfect, synchronized harmony. The strategy dictates that a squad is divided into two parts, a fire team and a maneuver team, or cover and assault elements. The fire team is responsible for laying down a base of suppressive fire to fix the enemy in their position. Crucially, this suppressive fire did not need to match the MG42's volume, it only needed to be accurate and continuous enough to keep the enemy's heads down. The maneuver team, meanwhile, uses the cover provided by the fire team's bullets to move rapidly across the ground. This movement is not a frontal charge, but a tactical flanking movement towards a position of advantage. The goal is to approach the MG42 position from an angle it cannot easily cover, exploiting the weapon's fixed arc of fire. Once the maneuver team reaches a new position, the roles are instantly reversed, and they become the new fire team. This fluid, leapfrog progression is called bounding overwatch and is the very heart of the American system. It allows for continuous movement and continuous fire, ensuring the initiative is never fully ceded to the defender. The constant change in the direction of attack also places incredible stress on the German MG42 crew. They are forced to shift their heavy weapon and its tripod, momentarily interrupting their deadly stream of fire. This brief pause is often the critical window the American maneuver team needs to close the distance and eliminate the threat. The genius of fire and maneuver lies in its utilization of smaller, distributed firepower, relying on tactical finesse over raw volume. The implementation of fire and maneuver was made possible by the superior and more realistic training methods of the U.S. Army. American basic training heavily emphasized small unit leadership and the principle of individual initiative at the lowest level. Every squad member, from the squad leader down to the newest rifleman, was expected to understand the fire and maneuver concept. Training exercises were designed to simulate the chaos and stress of combat, forcing soldiers to think quickly under pressure. The American soldier was not merely a caretaker for a machine gun but an autonomous fighter capable of complex decision-making. This level of tactical independence was a significant contrast to the often more rigid and centralized German infantry command structure. The U.S. Army placed a premium on marksmanship, especially with the semi-automatic M1 Garand, which provided controlled, accurate fire. The M1 Garand, with its 8-round EN block clip, allowed the average soldier to contribute effectively to the suppressive fire effort. Soldiers were constantly drilled in its buddy system and bounding overwatch, making the complex tactics second nature. This rigorous and adaptable training ensured that the doctrine could be executed under fire, even when leaders were incapacitated. The American system created flexible and resilient units that could adapt their tactics to the constantly changing battlefield geometry. They were trained to quickly identify the position of the MG42 and then instinctively begin the process of suppression and flanking. The ability to switch roles between the fire and maneuver elements seamlessly gave them a decisive edge. It was this superior quality of training, not merely the quantity of men, that began to nullify the MG42's power. The American training philosophy prepared the soldiers for a battle of wits and movement, not just a battle of attrition. The American small arms employed in the fire and maneuver doctrine were perfectly suited to its demands. The M1 Garand, designed by John C. Garand, was arguably the most influential rifle of the entire conflict. Its semi-automatic action allowed a single soldier to fire 8 accurate shots much faster than any bolt-action rifleman. This rapid, controlled fire was essential for the suppressive element of the fire team, where accuracy mattered more than sheer volume. The signature ping sound of the M1 Garand ejecting its empty clip often signaled a momentary lull in fire, but the soldier was quickly reloaded. Complementing the Garand was the M1918 Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, a key weapon in the American fire team. The BAR, designed by the legendary John Browning, provided the necessary automatic fire to keep the enemy's attention fixed. While slower than the MG42, the BAR's heavy bullet and steady rate provided a focused and intimidating stream of fire. It was used in short, controlled bursts, conserving ammunition while maintaining enough intensity to keep the German gunner suppressed. The combination of the Garand's rapid, accurate rifle fire and the BAR's continuous automatic fire proved to be the ideal counter-suppression combination. The U.S. infantry was not trying to overpower the MG42 with bullet count, but to outmaneuver it with effective, targeted fire. Every weapon had a clear role in the fire and maneuver ballet, from the squad leader's rifle to the BAR's heavy punch. This cohesive blend of individual weapons allowed the Americans to apply pressure from multiple points simultaneously. The M1 Garand and the BAR became the physical embodiment of the new, more aggressive American small unit tactics. Bounding overwatch is the tactical execution that turns the fire and maneuver principle into a reality on the battlefield. It is a simple but brilliant maneuver where one element of the squad provides cover while the other moves, then roles are reversed. The fire team establishes a strong base of fire, directing their shots near the German MG42 position to force the crew to remain behind cover. They use the M1 Garand and the BAR to maintain a constant, measured flow of bullets into the target area. The maneuver team, knowing their comrades are providing cover, then breaks cover and sprints toward a new, forward position. This movement is not random, it is calculated to place them on the flank of the MG42, outside its primary field of fire. The maneuver team's run is a short, aggressive dash, exposing them for the absolute minimum amount of time. Once the maneuver team is established in their new forward position, they immediately transition into the new fire team. They begin to provide cover for their comrades, now aiming their fire from the closer, flanking position. The original fire team then becomes the new maneuver team and sprints forward past the new covering position. This leapfrog method ensures that a portion of the squad is always firing, and a portion is always moving forward. It creates a relentlessly advancing tide of fire that the static German defense finds increasingly difficult to contain. The MG42 crew, trained to fire in long bursts against frontal assaults, struggles to track and effectively engage the rapidly moving flanking elements. The constant need to shift their focus and their heavy weapon breaks the continuous, paralyzing rhythm of the MG42's fire. This highly decentralized and fluid tactic was the key to unlocking the German defense and neutralizing their formidable machine gun. The true downfall of the MG42 lay in its primary strength, its static, sustained fire capability. While its volume was overwhelming in a frontal defense, the MG42 was heavy, tripod-mounted, and difficult to traverse rapidly. A fully deployed MG42 and its crew were relatively immobile, especially when they were focused on a large threat in front of them. The American fire and maneuver doctrine was specifically designed to target this critical vulnerability on the flanks. The maneuver team's goal was not to overwhelm the position but to reach a point of attack where the MG42 could not be easily brought to bear. This often meant a grueling, cautious crawl through hedgerows, dense woods, or along ditches to bypass the main line of fire. Once on the flank, the MG42 position was suddenly exposed to short-range rifle fire and, more importantly, hand grenades. The German crew would be forced to make a terrible choice: abandon their dominant weapon or turn it to face the new threat. Turning the MG42 meant momentarily ceasing fire against the original frontal threat, giving the pinned-down fire team a chance to advance. Abandoning the weapon meant the immediate collapse of the entire German defensive position, as its main strength was gone. The flanking maneuver often resulted in the American soldiers being able to rush the position with overwhelming force. This small unit tactic transformed the battlefield from a static shooting gallery into a dynamic, three-dimensional chess match. The sheer terror of the MG42 was replaced by the cold, calculating application of superior infantry movement and timing. Exploiting the flank became the textbook method for defeating an entrenched machine gun nest on the Western Front. The MG42's incredible rate of fire was a double-edged sword, creating a logistical weakness that the Americans exploited. Firing at 1,200 rounds per minute meant the MG42 could empty a standard 50-round belt in just 2.5 seconds. Sustained fire quickly overheated the barrel, requiring the crew to perform a barrel change every few hundred rounds. This barrel change procedure, while remarkably fast for a heavy weapon, still required precious seconds of exposure for the gunner. The German crew had to open the side cover, eject the scorching hot barrel, insert a fresh one, and secure the latch. During the height of a firefight, the American fire team would increase their own fire the moment they saw the Germans preparing for the change. This window of vulnerability was a prime opportunity for the maneuver team to cover a significant amount of ground without fear of suppression. Furthermore, the sheer consumption of ammunition by the MG42 created a major logistical burden on the German squad. The riflemen were constantly weighed down by heavy cans of machine gun belts, often prioritizing ammunition over their own supplies. In prolonged engagements, the German position could literally run itself out of bullets in a way that Allied forces rarely did. The American system, relying on controlled, accurate fire from individual rifles, was far more sustainable over a long period. The American squad possessed a better balance of firepower and logistical sustainability, allowing them to fight longer and more effectively. The ultimate irony of the MG42 was that its most formidable trait, its speed, was also the source of its inevitable breakdown in combat. The MG42 was a triumph of engineering for firepower, but a failure of doctrine for sustainability and flexibility. The story of the MG42 and the American fire and maneuver is a classic case study in tactical evolution during wartime. It demonstrates that the best weapon is often the one that is used with the smartest and most flexible doctrine. The German infantry bet their survival on the technological superiority and sheer volume of fire from a single weapon. They relied on the MG42 to create a static, impenetrable defense that would bleed the enemy dry in frontal assaults. The Americans, however, found their victory not in a new machine gun, but in the power of coordinated, small-unit maneuver. They realized that fixing the enemy with fire and then finding a vulnerability through movement was the key to overcoming any fixed position. This doctrine empowered the individual soldier, giving him the training and initiative to make critical decisions in the heat of battle. The fire and maneuver concept proved to be a versatile and resilient response to any defensive strongpoint, not just the MG42. It allowed the U.S. Army to maintain a steady, relentless advance across the challenging terrain of the European theater. The legacy of the MG42 remains as a powerful, terrifying weapon, but its myth of invincibility was definitively shattered. The machine gun could only guarantee victory when the enemy played by its rules and advanced directly into its fire. Once the U.S. infantry began moving and coordinating their fire, the MG42 was reduced to a heavy, vulnerable piece of metal. The battle between the MG42 and fire and maneuver was ultimately a victory for tactical adaptability over technological dogma. The U.S. Army's small unit tactics became the template for modern infantry combat, a testament to the effectiveness of bounding overwatch. The war showed that even the most destructive machine can be defeated by superior training and the relentless pursuit of the enemy's flank.